There have been very few rivalries that span an entire FNCS that don't include drop spot wars. However, last season in the Brazilian region, one of the greatest battles in FNCS history took place to very little press in our competitive community. Brazil is an incredibly colourful region, sporting some of the flashiest, most mechanically gifted players in the world, but despite this there have been a few players at the top for a very long time. And in this video, I'm going to be focusing on the insane 4-week-long rivalry between Frosty and King. Let's get into it. Weeks 1 and 2 in this rivalry will be dedicated to the ridiculous performance of King and his trio members Rusty and 100UM. There's quite simply no other way to put it. These 2 weeks were the most dominant 2 weeks we have seen and most likely will ever see in competitive Fortnite history. In week 1, they won 11 out of 12 games, and in week 2, they won 8 out of 12 games, making that 19 out of 24 games won by one trio. How on earth did they do this? Well, the best way that I can describe it is what I am now terming region conditioning. The best way I can describe this new term is actually exactly how it sounds. These guys conditioned their region in practice prior to FNCS each week to be completely and utterly terrified of them. Their reign of terror were completely unchallenged, with teams totally conceding height to them at half-half and allowing them to control it the entire way through moving zones. At this point I think it's important to mention that in week 1, where they managed to win 11 out of 12, they had the Dooms Ball, meaning that if anyone looked at them funny, they'd proceed to have their entire game ruined via the chucking a green ball of energy repeatedly at their build strategy. Of course, it's important to state that there is always skill in making it to late game consistently, with good mats to take height at half-half, plus always having Storm Surge wasn't easy for a lot of teams in FNCS finals. Their consistency at both getting to late game and then exploiting the fear and power they had over the other players in their region was purely and utterly mind-boggling. However, once the Dooms Ball was removed in week 2, the reign of terror continued. Removing the Dooms Ball slightly affected the consistency at which they could grief their way onto height every game, meaning there's actually some rare footage floating around of King and his trio playing mid-ground. However, look how free they have height in these clips. No one wants anything to do with them. It's worth watching King's entire video because, as I said, I really don't think we'll ever see domination on that scale ever again, both from a region conditioning standpoint and a results standpoint. Week 3 is where the tide started to turn away from King, Rusty and 100UM. In an absolute shock to everyone following the Brazilian scene, they failed to qualify for finals, finishing 6 spots outside of the qualifying threshold in 39th. Interested people worldwide started asking the question, which trio would step up and take the first place spot that they had just dominated for 2 weeks? The answer came in the form of Frosty, Kurtz and Ridley. Frosty, Kurtz and Ridley aren't much different to a lot of the other top quality trios worldwide, with an extremely established IGL in Ridley, accompanied by 2 of the most mechanically gifted and experienced players in the region. This trio's playstyle is much less dominant than King's, as they prefer to play low and mid-ground initially in moving zones, followed by a shockwave retake on second moving zone transition. This, along with Ridley's top tier decision making and the way I could see their roles interchange, made for an incredibly intellectually stimulating watch. They're very fundamentally sound mid-game, followed by a well-led and prepared endgame, started to make me realise how exactly they mounted a decent challenge on King and Co for first and finals. While King may want to suicide dive for height every game, Frosty's team were content to play for consistency in the mid-ground, much like Centered Commandment and Edgy, Jinxworthy and Alec, and other countless trios built around the concept of consistency. Leading into finals, the question on everyone's lips was fairly simple. Which would win out? Forcing height or consistency mid-ground? finals is always a battle of the playstyles, and it was more heavily pronounced in the Brazilian region than any other. In one corner you had King, a height suicide diver content to ruin your game to be on the alpha spot at half-half, and in the other corner, the best consistency team in the region led by Frosty and Redley. Right off the bat, playstyle wise, I personally lean towards consistency being the key towards consistent success. Funny how that works. The reason for this is purely mathematical, particularly in the longer form 12 game series. The concept I'm pushing here is regression to the mean, where although the more risky play of forcing high to half-half may be effective repeatedly in some circumstances, eventually this will lose out to circumstances outside of their control, with other teams picking up their nuts and looking at taking height, beams from low ground, and general confidence from the rest of the lobby rising as region conditioning wears off. In this clip I'm playing now, you can see them doing their usual big dick play, but this time it doesn't work out, and as a result they are eliminated. Regression to the mean had to happen, and their consistency waned from the first 2 weeks as their luck ran out. This to me was a huge impactor in the overall results of things, as I can finally reveal to anyone who didn't know that Frosty and his trio ended up taking the win in finals, securing each player $15,000. Coming back to this consistency idea, one thing that people out there may be interested in is that Frosty's trio are actually part of Center's coaching pool, with him helping them through their game plans and strategies for their wins. This is a clear indicator to me of where they got a good idea of their late game consistency strategy from, as well as never requiring Storm Surge or being in a terrible position. From the perspective of a coach who looks at situations completely objectively, this switch in fortunes had to eventually happen for King and his trio, but after this breakdown I think the biggest takeaway for anyone looking for one is pretty simple. Find a way to make your trio consistent, and then play the statistics game over the long term. Trios will be here all year round, so work that out now and see just how much better you perform. Thank you for watching.